I have two books, actually. The first one is Voyage of Purpose. And in Voyage of Purpose, I share my near-death experience and then the journey to integrating it, how I learned to live with the experience after the fact, because, these experiences aren't so, it definitely rocked my world. I was an engineer, and so my near-death experience just rocked my world, and I had to learn how to live with it. The second book is one that I wrote after my stage 4 lung and bone cancer. And it's about contemplative meditation, because I used that as one of the sources to help me to overcome my cancer. And it's about spiritual transformation. And it's kind of an interesting book because it was written with 44 chapters, and each chapter is devoted to a certain aspect to spiritual development.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. And they can find them. Do you have a website, or is it just on Amazon they can find?
They can go on any of the Amazon sites, or the UK Amazon, mm-hmm. US Amazon. They're listed there.
They're on there. Okay, brilliant. So you say you started off as an engineer, so I imagine you'd never really thought of anything near-death experience related or religion based. Had you really thought much about that before?
No, I didn't have any experience. I hadn't even heard of near-death experience before my experience. I was really, really involved in what my career was undersea exploration. I was, a commercial diver, but also the chief engineer of the research vessel. So, that was my world. And it was a very grounded type of world.
Did you grow up with any religious beliefs, or as an atheist, or just as indifferent?
My mom was agnostic, but and she was a single mom, so it was tough growing up because what she would do is she would place me with different families, and then she would find out that the different families weren't treating me very nice, and so then she would pull me out of that family and into another. But the funny thing was many of those families had different religious beliefs. Mostly. Well, no, they had a variety of different beliefs. And then at the age of 14, she brought me back into her family, and she moved us to Arizona, where in central Arizona, in a very small town just outside Sedona, where I got to connect with mostly Native American kids, because they were the only ones that I kind of related to, because I was a New Yorker, long-haired hippie type guy, and I didn't get along with the cowboys too well. And I didn't get along too well with the pacifist hippies that lived out there. So I was more New Yorker, a little more street tough type of person. And so I hung out with the Native American kids, and we got along just fine. And so there I was exposed to a different kind of spirituality that actually I think might have saved my life because I really was a rogue at the time, and I wasn't on a very healthy path, just because I didn't have any center, any being tossed around from one family to the next. It just really, I was a wild child, you might say.
Mm-hmm. So, your near-death experience triggered when you were out at sea, and you weren't diving, were you? Were in a ship working as maintenance or something? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the engineer, and we were actually out evaluating a remote operated submarine, an ROV, and we were on our way back when a storm hit the California coast with 25 to 30 foot seas, and so we were, but some of the crew had to be relieved to go to LAX. They had flights out, some of the engineers. And so the captain asked me, normally I don't leave the ship to run but because the seas were kind of rough that night, he thought that maybe because I knew the harbor better than any of the mates that we had on crew that day. So, so he asked me to go along, and I was just navigating. I wasn't steering the boat, but I was up in the bow of this small Zodiac. It's a rubber craft, and but it has a huge engine on the back. I mean, this thing could scoot in the water. It had a lot of power, and we used to use it to retrieve submarines. So it wasn't, it wasn't a little craft, and there were 5 of us in the Zodiac on our way into the harbor, but we didn't realize the harbor had blown us south. I mean, the storm had blown us south. Yeah, about almost a mile, and we ran into a breaker zone, and about a mile off the coast, we hit this breaker zone that we drove right off a 25-footer, and and so I yelled at the mate to turn it around, and as we turned it around, you could look up, you could see the next one was coming, and it came right down on top of us, and it just it wasn't pretty.
So when you say a breaker zone, what is that exactly?
Well, when the seafloor comes up a little bit, swells up, it creates waves. Huge waves. In fact, this area was a really well-known surfing area on the west coast of the U.S. And and so with the big storm offshore, it was creating these huge waves that were those curly, the ones that surfers just dream about, right? Well, you don't want to be under one when it's coming down, because it's not a pretty sight. So our boat was capsized, and I was thrown into the water as a result of that wave hitting us from above.
And then the experience began, I believe, as you began to drown.
Yeah, that's where. Well, I drowned. Even trained as a diver, I didn't panic or anything like that. It's kind of funny. I have this calm sense that comes over me when I'm in a real bad place, but I eventually drowned. I couldn't hold my breath any longer because the wave had pushed me down so far and just tumbled and tossed me to the point of I had totally lost orientation. And this was at night as well, so there wasn't you couldn't see the surface, so it was just pushing me around. Sorry?
Didn't know which way to go up.
No, and so. The worst thing would be to try to swim and be swimming down or something, So the best thing was to hang on to your life vest and hope, wait for it to bring you to the surface.
So how long ago was this incident?
Actually, it was tomorrow would be the anniversary, in 1983.
So quite a while ago.
Yeah. And it's just as fresh today as it was that day.
Many near-death experiences say that the memory is exactly the same. It never changes.
I have really, I can, there might be 2 or 3 dreams that I've had in my life that were profound enough that I recall them kind of, sort of. But this is a memory that is so crystal clear in so many details and in such length. It's not like a memory of your childhood. It's not anything like the memory that of a dream or of anything like that. It's like I said, there's probably 2 or 3 dreams that maybe stood out in my life that have stuck with me, but this
not to the same level of detail.
Yeah. It's because it's such an expansive experience. I've heard some of the people that are into science, brain science and memory science and that sort of thing, that the synapse, it so overwhelms the brain when we come back, because many of experiences are actually brain dead, during the course of their experience. But when they come back, there's like a cellular memory, or our non-local consciousness still retains the entire the entire experience. But it but your brain doesn't have the synapses right away to be able to recall that memory. It takes time for those synapses to develop, so that then that memory starts flooding back for experiencers. For me, I remembered most of it, but there were some other little details about the life review that kept coming back. Like it was almost like deja vu on steroids, some of it, you know.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost as if it's some kind of trauma that you experience, and then your brain kind of, I mean, in a negative trauma, your brain protects you by not allowing you to recall it until later on. So it seems a similar thing to that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's and I think that's helpful because when we come back, we have enough issues to deal with as an experiencer. Like what just happened. I was I was talking to God. All these things that are just so unearthly that that it's it even in today's society, you're afraid to speak out until you feel you're safe. You're somewhere where you can talk about it, where you're safe, and that people aren't going to judge you, you know.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so you were tossed into the water and you began to drown. So what happens then?
Yeah, well, I as soon as I breathed in salt water, I popped out of my body into this void, this darkness that was just quiet and calm. You got to realize I just came from this roaring sea that was just, and it was
Pounding.
cold and all of that. So to find myself in this peaceful, calm, quiet, and I wasn't uncomfortable. I was rather amazed, actually. I was kind of curious, like, what is this? And it's kind of interesting because it didn't feel like I was alone. It felt like everything that ever was there with me. And there was this overriding presence that you could feel while you were in this blackness. But the real, but it was more like you were, because everything was like nothingness, you had this opportunity to examine yourself a little bit, So it's kind of hard to describe this void because it's nothing like you've ever experienced here. I've tried to simulate it with like deprivation tanks and things like that, and
Nothing close.
Nothing even close.
Because in my imagination, when I think of being out of body in a black void of nothingness, I would imagine that would be a terrifying thing.
Yeah, it is for many experiencers, but for me, it wasn't, because I had just come from this really, really traumatic death, okay, into the void, kind of like thrown in, and so to me it was very curious. In commercial diver training, we're trained to know what oxygen deprivation is and all of that, so they actually put us into a situation where we, our oxygen levels decrease and we start to feel euphoric and all of that sort of thing. So that's commercial training, but but anyway, I had gone so far beyond that I was just curious. I was incredibly curious. But then I saw a light, and it started out as just this little pinprick. But you can imagine in absolute darkness, a pinprick of light is incredibly bright. And it felt like I was moving toward it. It was moving toward me. I have yet to this day understood but it felt like movement is all I can say. It felt like we were moving toward each other. And as I got closer, I saw that it was millions upon millions of fragments of light, and they were all like of one mind. They were moving in unison and
kind of like a school of millions of fish.
Yeah, just
Mm.
like yeah, like if you saw a school of sardines in the ocean near the surface with the light reflecting off of them, all the brilliant colors from their scales are all represented, and they all move like they have one mind, you know. They all move in one direction then the other. Well, this is kind of, but only infinite, because as I got closer, these fragments of light just went on and on and on and on. And as I was getting closer to it, I started feeling these waves of love. It was almost like a warm embrace of love. And it's still hard to talk about it even to this day. But the but three fragments broke away and started to come toward me. And as they did, they were welcoming me home. And now I told you, I kind of had a fragmented childhood. You know, I really didn't have a sense of home, but I recognized these light beings as a family. Not like anything here, but a family that it felt like we had spent lifetimes together. It was, I mean, it just felt so familiar. And so and eventually a dozen came to greet me, and they were all welcoming me home. And it was the most love I think I've ever felt to this, you know, before and after. It's the most love that I've ever felt.
Hmm. So was this all still taking place in the location of the void?
Well, I was outside of the light. I was coming out of the void and at the threshold of these fragments of light. And also at this point, you know, I looked at myself. I tried to look at myself, and my consciousness actually sped away from my being, you know, because I didn't have a physical body, but my being, and my consciousness turned around and looked at me, and I was becoming a fragment of light. So it was kind of, and that was a little weird, because it was like the minute my consciousness desired to see something, it wasn't restrained to just my physical, or there was no physical. So this is so hard to explain sometimes, but it was, you know, but your vision or your perception was able to leave your location and
Right.
be able, you know.
So did you have a sense of kind of a non-physical body? If you look down, would you see something resembling a body in the void?
It was more of a light body. It didn't have the actual defined figures of a person, of a humanoid, but there was a perception of eyes. It was one thing that I could see, and when I saw these other light beings, I still recognized them as people that I had spent lifetimes with. There was still that, and eventually they kind of communicated to me, and we all moved in unison into the light, into this area, and it felt very spherical, like this giant ball, and we went into it, this ball of light, where I started to have a life review, and I started to relive my life, and my soul family, as I call them, were reliving it with me. And I got to experience every interaction in my life, but not only through my perception, my point of view, but I got to feel it through everyone I'd ever interacted with through their point of view. And like I said, I wasn't a real nice guy. I wasn't a bad guy, but I wasn't, I was pretty brash. I really didn't care about other people.
Mm-hmm.
I was a survivor.
Understandably so, with your background.
Yeah, I had to stand up for myself in order to get anywhere in this world up until that point. And so I didn't trust other people. In fact, I probably didn't. In fact, I know I didn't have a very high regard for myself even. And so, so the life that I had led and the interactions, I got to see how I had affected people in that way. But I also got to see, so I saw the negative, but I also got to see that every once in a while I would do something with loving intention that would create these huge ripples and affect people even more profoundly than when I did something terrible, you know? And so that really struck me. That, I mean, and I just, it was very heartfelt when I would do something like that. Because we're not always bad. I mean, none of us perceive ourselves as bad people. And we do have, love for others and for things, so when we come from that place of love, it has a lot more energetic push, a lot more energetic energy just behind it in order to affect change.
Because there's a positive intention behind the action.
I believe so. When you have a loving intention behind your actions, it has more energy to affect change. And so you would get to see this, and it would appear almost like ripples of after effects, like you would say something to someone or you would do something for someone, and then that someone would then, right, feel it in their heart.
Yeah. It's like a chain of
yeah.
positivity.
It was incredible to watch how it could affect change. And that really stuck with me. That part of the life review really was incredibly important to me. So anyway, it just it went on like that. It went on. And then I finally reached a point where I wasn't, I had died, but it continued. My life continued. And that was a little disoriented in its own way, because I was, I didn't have any foundation for it.
No. So, you'd only known your life up till your death point. So
that was all very crystal clear. And then when we got past that threshold, it was like, I like to say it was like looking down almost like a corridor. And everything in the center of the corridor was fairly in focus. It was in focus and relatable. But there was also, beyond the corridor, was this periphery that was out of focus. But I could turn my attention right or left, and it just felt like I had the free will to deviate from the corridor. And so, like I said, it was a little disorienting, but my family loved me. They supported me, and we kind of traversed down this corridor. Which,
when you say family, so you mean the soul family? Or
the
lights.
The other light beings that were with me, experiencing this with me, and they were experiencing the same way I was, with all this, all these multiple fragments of consciousness, for going off in all these different directions all at once. It was quite intense.
So you're able to split your consciousness up and to have simultaneous. So you're able to split your awareness up to have multiple experiences at once.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Well, you can imagine? Okay, so you're out with your friends, and you're having a good time. Everybody's being nice, but you get to experience everyone in the crowd. Okay, you get to feel what they're having, what they're worried about, what they're happy about. So your actual awareness is fragmented into these multiple streams of awareness all at the same time, and you're experiencing from all these different points of view all at once.
Very difficult to imagine.
It is difficult to imagine, and it's intense to experience. But at the same time, because when we're out of our body, our consciousness is able to expand to its full, I call it its totality, where we have this ability to be able to do that. And when we're in that state, everything seems so simple and efficient. It's hard to explain, but even the multiple streams of consciousness just seems so simple, so flawless.
So that's part of consciousness's actual nature, which is restricted here.
Yes, yes. Within this physical being, our consciousness is restricted, because I believe that our consciousness doesn't just reside in our mind. I believe that our mind is one receptor, our heart is another receptor, and I believe even our gut ganglia is a third receptor, and that we receive information from our consciousness, but because of the physical limitations of this body, we can only take so much input.
Which is kind of a difficult view to express in the days of modern materialism and different things like that.
Very much so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even in some spiritual communities, it's still kind of hard to, they may not have made that leap yet. But in some research communities, they're exploring this. So I hold out that there's we'll learn more and more as we
Sure.
evolve.
Okay, so you've had the life of you, and then you're going down this corridor of multiple experiences. Are these experiences of life beyond your physical death point?
Yeah, at the time I didn't quite realize, but yeah, they were my future life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
all right. So what was to come in physical life?
Yes, what was to come in physical life. And I finally reached a certain point where all the light itself, all these millions upon millions of fragments, spoke in unison, and they said, "This is not your time, you must return." And I flatly said, "No way." I said, "No, I'm feeling love like I've never felt before. I have a family that I didn't even know existed, and is more family than anybody I know on in my physical life."
So just briefly, when you say they said this, how did they say this?
It was a resonance. This is really cool, because it was this almost parental kind of loving resonance that just kind of like it was very deep. It was very right to your soul, right to your core essence. It just resonated into your essence and was so clear and understood.
So it was more a feeling of it's now time to go back, rather than an actual telepathy.
But it was so expansive, more than just a feeling. When we have feelings here, they're quite restrictive compared to this. This was like suddenly a flash of being connected to everything all at once, and they all focus themselves at you and are communicating to you in unison. So it's like it's like every soul that ever was or ever will be is focused on you in that millisecond.
Kind of like when you have a magnifying glass with the sun and you pinpoint it to one specific area, all that information focused on that one area.
Yeah, that sort of you're streaming it all into one at one point. Yeah. And I said no way, because I knew my body was broken and I didn't really want to go back to it. And but then it spoke one more time. It said, "You must return. You have a purpose." And again, with that expanded consciousness and that thought of purpose, suddenly I understood the purpose. And with understanding, I immediately went to acceptance. I totally accepted it. The minute I reached acceptance, I found myself outside my body in the ocean, watching it still being tumbled and tossed in the ocean.
Was your non-physical body in the ocean or above the surface? Or
my body was under the water still, being tumbled and tossed. I was outside observing it. And to this day, I kind of wondered about that for a long time, because there was no light. This was at night. So how I could see my body clearly in the water, was something as well. But not only was I there, but the three original light beings that greeted me were with me. And we were all observing my body as it was, being tumbled and tossed. So it was kind of like an out-of-body experience in a way. Well, it was an out of body experience, but we observed a wave push some of the wreckage of the Zodiac near my body, and the bow line actually wrapped itself around this arm and this wrist, this arm. And when another set of waves hit the wreckage popped up. It had some air left in one of the rubber pontoons. And so as it popped up, it cinched that line around me and it yanked my arm up, actually dislocated my shoulder and this thumb. But I didn't feel anything because I wasn't in my body. I was just observing this. And
it's almost as if it was, almost as if it was orchestrated to do that by the spirits around you.
Yeah. And so we followed it up, and I was kind of in awe because we've talked about this expansive consciousness, but I felt like I was so much bigger than that body. The body just seemed so small to me. I was kind of in wonder of how is the enormity of me going to fit in there, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my ponder as I was observing this happening. And when we got to when the body got up to the surface, it got all tangled up in the lines. And that's when my soul family gave me a gentle push, and I found myself back into my body.
Did you notice any something that's commonly reported in out-of-body experience, not so much near death, but out-of-body experiences, is a silver cord that connects
Yeah, I believe there is. In my second experience, I observed that more because I was being because it's very faint. That cord is very faint. It's not like a solid rope or something like that. It's just this very, very faint cord. And I saw it in my second experience more so than in the first. In the first, I was in really gaga awe at everything that was happening to me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was having a hard time taking it all in, especially right after I got back. And so, you're there, you're trying to expel this salt water that's, gotten into your lungs. And I could hear my friends, or my mates that were in the ship, and they were looking for me. I'd been gone for a while, and they'd been looking for me, and they stayed in that breaker zone looking for me, which was a dangerous place to be.
Yes, absolutely. Do you know how long you were underwater?
They claimed it was somewhere between 15 and 18 minutes.
Right. So regardless, that's a long enough time for you to certainly have been dead.
I know as a commercial diver, I could hold my breath. The best time would be 3 minutes. Best time. And that's a long time. And that's after I hyperventilated for quite a while, and then, you have to breathe. So, I didn't get a chance to hyperventilate. This happened so fast that you were in the water, and so, yeah, I was ice cold. I mean, I didn't feel it because I was numb. I was just numb. My entire body was numb. And I was having a hard time staying on the surface. And so I realized, because when you come back, you still feel like you're partially connected to that greater consciousness. Feels like you're half there and half here. And so I knew there was something wrong with my life vest, because all of them had popped up to the surface right away. Why didn't I,
Yeah.
And so I opened up my vest and I looked at it, and it was one of the old World War II Mae West type life vests, the ones that were these big pillows, big orange pillows, right? And the fiber lining had become saturated with salt water. And so it was actually dragging me down. So it was supposed to save me, actually drown me. And so I let go of that, and it sunk, right, and we all grabbed onto what was left of the flotsam, and we swam into shore. We had another mile to swim with a dislocated shoulder and thumb.
Yes, indeed.
And just hang on, it's kind of, and after dying and coming back. So it was, I was in shock at that point. I'll honestly admit that I was in, It was, I don't remember much of the swim coming in. Now, isn't that really weird? I remember all of the aspects of the death, but then the part of fighting for your life, I kind of remember, but there's a few things that happened during that stick out, but other than that, because that was a mile swim, that's a long time. It takes a while to swim.
Yes, that is a long swim. Yeah. Yes, definitely. So that was the first experience, and that was
1983.
At 1983. So when did the second experience take place?
1994.
And what was that?
That was, I was actually, it wasn't a near-death experience. It was a near-death-like experience, or similar experience. Depends on the nomenclature of your day. But I was on a retreat with, the time from the first one and the second one, I had trouble dealing with the experience. So I kind of shoved it, as much of it as I could, as far back in my mind as I could. And I just accepted a few little things that helped me to deal with it, because I didn't feel like I could share. I didn't share it. I shared it with my first wife, had a bad reaction, and I didn't feel like I could share it with my mates. So I self-isolated for 11 years until that second experience. And the second experience, I had changed quite a bit. I didn't even realize how much I'd changed, but I'd changed. And I had connected with this group, a spiritual group. And I quit my life at sea. I became a manager of dialysis programs in central New York State. And and they were going on the spiritual group was going on this retreat back to Sedona, Arizona. And so, I grew up there, and this is like old stomping grounds for me. So I was excited to go with this group, and I thought, well, I'll spend a little time with the group, but also I'm going to hit some of the old trails of my childhood and go, and enjoy myself. And the first day there, they wanted to have a meditation in one of the spiritual spots there. And I'd been there many times. And so I knew this one place that I used to like to sit, where you could sit with your back up against the stone and you could look out over the vista of the valley. And I was like, nice. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to meditate. And when I lived there before, some of the grandmothers had taught me how to meditate, which wasn't like traditional meditation. It was more like vision questing type of meditation. Okay. And so they had taught me how to go within myself. And so I thought, well, I'll go do that. And and so I went up there and I started to go inward when I heard the light speak to me. And it said, return to the light. And there was no stopping it. I was in the void to the, saw the light, my soul family, the life review. Only this time in the life review, I had lived in 11 years. And I got to see that 11 years. And the change that first experience had created in me, even when I had denied a lot of it and had pushed it down and didn't want to remember. But I had accepted, I used to call it acceptance, tolerance, and truth. Acceptance of myself, tolerance of others around me, and truth that is not so much just factual truth, but truth that resonates with your heart, which is more of a personal type of truth. Okay. And it has to deal with our essence, with who we are, that sort of thing. So just accepting that had catapulted me into a huge amount of change in those 11 years. And I had, and during those 11 years, I started having these insights that I didn't know where they came from. It wasn't something I'd learned. It wasn't something I'd lived in life. And so as an engineer, I was testing it all the time to see if is this real information? Is it reliable? Is it veridical?
So these were kind of precognitive experiences.
Yeah, they were. And some of them were quite intense, and some were but I didn't have any control over it. I would just get these, these impressions that would just suddenly be there, and I would know it. It would be, I used to call them knowings because I didn't have any other word for it. But so that was during that 11-year period. But then after the second experience, those precognitive episodes started to have a voice. I actually I had conversations with spirit. And I recognized that they were actually the voices of my soul family, the beings that created me, that I recognize as family. And so they each have their strengths, and they all, and many people nowadays, I think they would call them their guides, their spirit guides, their angels, their, I don't really care what name you want to put on it. I agree with all of that, some feel bigger and more present than others, they might be angels. Some feel like they're just almost a confidant, so they, I would call those guides. But to me, they were all family.
Yeah, sure. So what pushed you to from that to do the energy work that you do now on the is it Dharma Talks?
Yeah, Dharma Talks is my website, dharmatalks.com.
So when did you first become kind of interested in how the energies of the body are formatted, how they're structured, and how to intervene with them?
Well, it's interesting when the spiritual group, after my second experience, they used to have spring and summer. They used to have a summer conference and a spring retreat, and during these, they had these amazing teachers that from all over the world that would come and would teach different things. And so I took some classes, some summer classes with some of these teachers on, shiatsu and things like that, energy, a little bit of energy medicine, things like that. But I never really applied it in my life. I never, until 2000, November 2000, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung and bone cancer. It actually went into my spine and ate away 2.5 bones of my thoracic, and my spine collapsed. And that's when, that's when you knew trouble was about.
Yeah, and stage 4 is kind of the end stages, isn't it?
It is. And they weren't even going to treat me. They were going to just give me some morphine and some Percocet and make me as comfortable as possible. And they told me to get my affairs in order.
Yeah, so they were going to put you on palliative care.
Yep. And but at that time, I had become the manager of one of the departments within the hospital. And so I had said, no, we're going to treat it, because one of the things that I saw in my life review or life preview was that I was going to have cancer and that I was going to live beyond it. And so and my guidance at that time, excuse me, my guidance at that time was telling me that, I was weighing the options that I had. And they wanted me to do traditional therapy as well as balance it out with some holistic approaches. And by this time, I'd become very involved with spiritual communities. And so I had people coming out of the woodworks offering all kinds of therapies. Some of them were a little,
esoteric.
Well, they were out there. One person, and God bless her, she had her heart in the right place and everything, but she wanted me to do this jumping up and down on a trampoline. Well, my spine had just collapsed. I don't think that is the healthiest thing to do.
Absolutely not.
So you have to weigh these options. You have to what's going to work for you. What worked for me may not be the best option for everyone else, but I think we all have that ability to weigh our options. We all have an intuitive sense about us. It's a matter of allowing it to help us and to inform us. We have to give it permission to do that. And once we do that, then we can look at the options that are available. And my spirit communication was very clear. It wanted me to do traditional medicine and to balance out the holistic approaches. And I understood it because I knew it was part of that purpose that I had been told, and I knew that there was a purpose for me to get beyond the stage 4 lung and bone cancer.
Mm. So just from a physiological point of view then, without the holistic approach and just the traditional medicine, what would you say was the likelihood of your survival from stage 4 lung and bone cancer at that stage?
That's a great question, because I worked in the hospital. I knew how to get my 5-year survivability statistics. I knew where to go to get that. And so I went online, and this is in 2000. So I was using the internet as it was in those days. And I went to the website where you could do that. And I plugged in my prognosis, and my computer would crash. And so I would, the blue screen of death,
Yeah.
And so I would, take everything down, reboot it, go back and go, re-go into the website, start all over again, and the same thing would happen. So it was like, okay, you don't want me to know what the survivability statistics are, right? And so, but later I went back, after I survived the cancer, I did go back and I had 0.1% survivability to live beyond 5 years.
So 0.1% of 1%, so 0.1% chance.
It's 0.001.
And just out of interest, what were the computers that you used to check the statistics before you survived? Was it the same computer? Was it a different computer?
It probably was.
Probably the same.
Because I was only in treatment for 6 months before I was cancer free. So I assume it was the same. I don't know for certain, but I'd be pretty certain that it was the same computer.
Yeah. It makes sense that they probably didn't want you to know, because as soon as you start having that information, you start to maybe doubt yourself, and your intention begins to wane somewhat.
Yeah, I feel that I was lucky because I had that pre-awareness that I was going to survive this. And so I didn't have doubt. Everyone around me did. And they all thought I was in denial because they all were expecting me to die within 6 or 7 weeks. But I knew I wasn't. And so it was, it was kind of an interesting period, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was the most suffering I think I've ever gone through in my entire life. The near-death experience in the ocean, that was horrendous. But having your spine collapse and stage 4 lung and cancer, going through chemo and radiation all at the same time, that is and the pain of a spine that's collapsed was just unbelievable.
I can imagine it would be. So were your doctors surprised when you came out cured?
Yeah, in fact, they never used, because we're 20 years out now, right? And just my last oncology appointment, because I go once a year still for a full checkup, because they
I suppose you need to, don't you?
Yeah, they figured it was going to come back at some point, and so 20 years out, my oncologist finally said, I think at this point we can call it a cure. But up until then, they never used that word around me.
No. So it's effectively a cure that was 99.9% certain to not happen. Yeah.
They said if there's another occurrence, it would be a new occurrence. It wouldn't be a reoccurrence.
Right. I see. So do you put that down then to the holistic approaches that you took, or down to the fact that it was just something that you knew was not going to win and it was just a lucky maybe medical situation?
I think it was a combination of the both. I think because I know that there was purpose for me to go through that suffering, because now I can counsel people that are going through chemo and radiation and all of that, because I've been there. I can empathize with them. I understand their hopes. I understand their fears. I understand what their family is going through. And so I think the purpose was for me to actually experience that so that I could counsel people on that level.
Right. Sure. Okay. So
and part of the holistic was energy work. And this is where I really, because circling back to your other question about, when did I become really interested? Yeah, I had toyed around with it, in the in-between years, but I really didn't really explore it as a modality until I had to use it on myself. And that's where I had spirit guidance that helped me. And I call it white light energy work, because what I do is, fortunately, in the years after my second experience and before the cancer, I had a couple near-death experiencer mentors. And one, Margaret Keene, taught me how to go back into the light. And that we have that ability to return to the light at any time. It's just a matter of finding our own doorway, our own key to be able to do it. And so she actually walked me back into the light and showed me that this is something that we, have the ability to do. And so Margaret, because she taught me that, I used that in the in learning how to facilitate my own. And there was quite a bit of great guidance there. Some of the things that I was taught was, don't try to, use visualization, because visualization and intention are incredible tools that we have available to us. And so use visualization, but don't visualize it gone, because that creates a void within your body. And our body is always, we have to live within the physical limitations that we have here as, in this world that we reside in. And so to create a void is very dangerous within our body. So our body is always seeking homeostasis, equilibrium. And so it taught me to use a feather, to wear away the cancer through visualization with a feather, slowly and a little methodically over time. And so I did that for 3 months, just a little at a time. And eventually I got communication from spirit that, that it was gone, but I was using this white light energy to reduce the cancer. And it took a while to get the doctor. It took another 3 months to get the doctors to actually do a PET scan to be able to examine it, because they felt that putting me through that was just extra trauma, because they really didn't feel I was going to survive. And so they were honoring my wishes to treat it, but they really felt that I was,
just causing unnecessary suffering on yourself.
Yeah. So, and I can respect that was their belief, It's just, I feel I had, a little better knowledge than, I had a little better understanding of my own case. So when they finally they did a PET scan, and so they scanned my body. Well, no, first they did a CAT scan, and it showed that, the cancer wasn't there. It was there, but the cells were dead. And so that's when they did the PET scan, and they found that all the cancer cells weren't active. And so, but I had to live with, they wouldn't do any corrective spine surgery for over a year.
So you still had that collapsed spine pain to deal with?
Yeah, I had to live with that for a year before they would do, corrective surgery.
Yeah. So now you work on healing other people through their energy bodies. So how does that work? What's the the mechanism of that?
Yeah, I learned that in my healing journey, I learned that all healing and energy work is done in the present moment. It's not really about the past. It's not really about the future. So you have to look at where you are mentally, emotionally, physically and spiritually, because all of those facets come into play into who we are in this moment. And so when I have a client, I talk to them for about maybe 15 minutes, and we talk about where they are mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And as we're having that talk, I'm starting to sense and feel their essence. And I'm usually starting to receive some information during the conversation. And so I might
So when you
impart.
say, sorry, when you say you're receiving their essence, what's that experience?
Well, it's it's kind of like um, I start to feel that expansiveness a little bit, and it's kind of like a shimmer. It's not total connection, but it's I start to be able to, in the back of my mind, while I'm talking to them and while we're having a conversation and I'm looking at them. Well, a lot of times I like to do the healing on the phone because I don't want to see, like here in a Zoom call, I would do that with a counseling client when we're doing spiritual counseling or coaching. But when I'm doing energy work, I'd rather just be on the phone or on Skype or on Zoom, but without our
Without
video,
cameras?
without
Yeah.
videos on, because I really want to listen to them speak. I want to listen to that. Something about the vibration of their voice and everything helps me to tune into them without the distraction of body language. So, and I prefer either, a phone call or so sometimes it's on Skype, sometimes it's on Zoom if it's an international call, but in the US I just use a regular phone call because I don't have an international plan. So so anyway, I listen to them and I start to feel their essence, and then usually I will give them a breath exercise. And I do that on purpose because I found that the if they can meditate and focus and find some stillness, that creates an open vessel that makes my connection with them that much easier. And so while they're meditating, it would be the same thing if you were here and I was doing it in person. You'd be laying on my table and I would be playing some meditation music or something, and I would give you a breath exercise to focus yourself. And then I go into the light, and the minute I go into the light, after we had that conversation, their light, their essence is right there. And
So when you
so
go into the light, is that the same experience as you had on the first near-death experience and on the second?
very similar, only I'm not going there because I'm dying and I need to transition. Okay. So instead, I'm just going into the light, and it's more my light. In other words, what I'm really doing is I'm transitioning into my totality of light. In this life, I believe that we only carry maybe 10, 20, 30% of our light with us. Okay. Depending, and it goes up and down depending on our need. And I could talk, that would be a whole other conversation about how I see that working. But anyway, but when I go into the light, when I transition, I go into that 100% of my light essence. Okay. And then I can communicate with your light essence. All right. And, and then your light essence actually directs me. And I can visualize your physical body, and then sometimes your guides, sometimes deceased loved ones are there, sometimes angels, and they appear to me, and they, along with your essence, speak to me and guide me through basically whatever your needs are, whatever your body is calling for. And it can, the neat thing is it's not all physical. It can be emotional. It can be spiritual blocks. It can be, it doesn't really matter because because we're working on all those levels at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And of course, they're all interconnected into one system. So,
Right.
Indeed. Right. So, at this point, when you go into the light, are you still in your physical body? Are you aware of your physical body, or are you kind of out in the more expanded state, unaware and uncaring of
it
what
used
goes on
to
in
be
the
it's evolved over time, because I've been doing this for a while now. Because my cancer ended 20 years ago, and so I've been doing this quite a bit since then.
Yeah.
And so it's evolved. I would say at first, yeah, it was like going into the light, and it was a little hard at first. You have to almost anesthetize yourself to it, because in this physical body, we have all of our emotions, okay? And in the light, there's a level of detachment from emotion, okay? Because we see everything so clearly and so simply. But when we're in our physical body, if we were exposed to the love that is present in the light in our physical body, we just want to cry. We just want to cry with joy, because it's it's so powerful, So I had to, when Margaret first took me there, I mean, I came back and I was just a puddle of tears. It was just so joyous and so loving that, your emotions just overwhelm you. So the first few times I had to kind of learn how to go there and detach a little bit. Okay. So yes, at first it was very much like, but now when I go there, I cross the threshold, but I'm still very, very connected to my butt in the seat here. Okay. I know what my body is doing. And I know what's going on around my body, but my awareness is in the light. My awareness is in the light. So it's a little different than it used to be.
And do you find that the emotion that you experience while you're in that light does have an effect and make you tear up?
I'll tell you, I come out after with some clients, and because I always write up my impressions of what happened while I was in the light, and a lot of times, I'm there's a lot of tears there sometimes, especially when someone's guide shows me how much they love them and how much they're supporting them or something like that. And it's like, oh my gosh,
So how do you then, from the light, attach onto the energy of the client?
Well, when I connect to their light, their essence, I can see their body, and I don't totally understand how that works, but I can see their physical body. And so we're able to direct their light energy into the areas that need the attention the most. And a lot of times sometimes it's nothing like what they thought they wanted, but it was exactly what they needed.
See, and how do you identify which areas that is that needs work?
I'm directed. I don't. I just allow. I'm just kind of a channel. I just allow it. I don't attach to their energy. I just, as directed, I just help it to flow into the areas that it's supposed to go, or channels it's supposed to go into. Sometimes it goes into meridians. Sometimes it goes into more of an energetic type of thing. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's energetic, sometimes it's spiritual. So it's always a little different. It's never the same. Never. I've been doing this for quite a few years. I've got hundreds of clients, and I can almost honestly say I don't think I've ever had the same thing happen twice. I'm constantly surprised and humbled by some of the messages that I get for clients, and then they say, "Oh my God, well, I never told you that. How did you know that?" Type of things and stuff like that.
Sure. So are you directing their own energy from their higher onto themselves? Right. So it's not your energy mixing and
no, I'm not mixing my energy with theirs. I'm only helping their energy to because a lot of times in life, we don't realize it, but we've blocked ourselves off from our own vital energy. Because we're so wrapped up in life circumstances that we don't, and so sometimes we need some help. Sometimes you need an energy worker to help to transition those blocks and barriers that we've put up in life. Sometimes I can see them. I had a client just the other day that said that spiritually she's, it was more of a spiritual healing, and that spiritually she had felt these blocks. And so I didn't go in looking for blocks, but this was one of the few times that I could actually perceive where it was, and the why, the root of it, that's not very common though.
No. Okay, so I suppose moving on to the unfortunate but important aspect of this is that, what do you say to those who say this is all nonsense, this is all woo woo, and anybody that charges for this sort of thing is a charlatan?
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
You know what, I think a bit of skepticism is healthy. I believe in skepticism. I'm a firm believer that we all should be skeptical. I don't want to live life with some charlatan trying to take advantage of me. So I know in my life, because I was an engineer, I didn't believe in any of this stuff before, before my experience. I think I think what you have to do is you have to look at how these experiences affect the experiencer. When you start to look at that, you start to see, what is it in the Bible? They say, judge them by their acts, When you start to see how it changes a person and how compassionate a person becomes afterwards, how they go searching for the love. Some of these things are challenges actually for many experiencers, because they come back and they experience this overwhelming love, but then now they want to find it in life.
Of course.
And so, but it affects them in sometimes subtle ways, but over time in great ways. And many come back with gifts. I'm just one person, and yeah, I developed a healing gift, but I also have some precognitive gifts as well. But many people come back with some amazing gifts. Some can communicate with animals. Some can, there's just these amazing gifts that some of the experiencers come back with. And what I find is actually kind of telling, is that there are common themes in these experiences, and these themes have been, a part of human history for years and years and years, going back to ancient Greece and all of that time. Okay, people have been having these experiences. Now, in the scientific community, it's still considered a phenomenon, because we don't, it's very hard to prove something like this. But what I say is, you have felt love at some point in your life. You have felt love. Now, you cannot prove to me what that love looks like, what it feels like, what it tastes like. You can't tell me what that was, but you did experience it. Well, it's very much like these experiences. It's not something that we can describe totally. And the descriptions that I'm giving you are just brushing the surface, kind of. It's as best I can in the physical world that we live in, and I'm trying to relate it to physical type of circumstance, and so it's very hard to do that, but we've all experienced love, and love is one of those things that I believe is the glue of the universe myself, because it permeates everything. But it only touches us when we focus our awareness on it. And that's when we're reaching out our consciousness beyond the physical into, it doesn't matter. It could be the furniture around you. It could be something outside your window. Beauty has a great effect, because it transitions that, it's the bridge to love. a lot of times. And what you find beauty in and what I find beauty in could be two different things altogether. And that's another one of those, hard to describe. What is beauty?
Yeah, it's a subjective thing, isn't
Yes, it's very subjective.
So, So I suppose one last area to touch on is when people talk of usually souls, which I suppose is the same thing we're talking about, consciousness or awareness. Many believe that that is only a human trait, and that animals, wild animals and pets, don't have that sort of thing. They don't have, I suppose, afterlives or ability to communicate or energy or whatever. What do you think on that sort of opinion?
Well, I know experiencers who would dispute that because they experienced, interacting in their afterlife with animals, and animals came and greeted them in the afterlife, that sort of thing. I believe, because we were talking about love and how love permeates into everything. It's a part of the animal kingdom as well. The plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the mineral kingdom. It's a part of all of that. And so energetically, it has a resonance. Even a rock has resonance. I mean, look at quartz. We've used quartz. Quartz is a great example because we've used quartz because it compresses vibration. And that's why we started out with quartz radios, because we could send a frequency through quartz and receive it through quartz, that sort of thing. Well, that's a stone, all right? It's a mineral, but it has vibrational attributes to it. We all have that, and it's all, different levels of vibration. And so I would say that, I believe that, and I've had experiences kind of like after death communication with deceased animals that I've loved. Okay. They've come to me after they've passed. I've seen them, they've communicated with me in animal ways, not in a voice type way, but in animal ways, and so, I believe that they do pass on. I believe they do have a consciousness of sorts, because I really believe our consciousness is all part of that vibrational universe that, unifies us all.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Seeking Eye Life Exploration podcast. If you did and would like to continue following my research, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and following the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. You can also join our Facebook discussion group. You can find the link to this and other Seeking Eye online profiles at seeking-eye.com. Thank you.